I sit here now, years later, the scent of sea salt and old paper surrounding me, and the conflict still feels as fresh as morning dew. It is not the guilt that lingers. Guilt is a sharp, momentary pain, but the sheer, staggering complexity of the love itself. I was given a heart that mapped itself into two distinct territories, each vital, each profoundly, impossibly beautiful. And the tragedy, the beautiful, crushing tragedy, was that both territories demanded allegiance to only one flag. They say that love is singular, an arrow aimed at one perfect target. My experience proved them naive. My heart was not a target, it was a cathedral, and in its two grand aisles, two different deities found worship. Elara, the anchor and the library. Elara came first, a quiet, necessary gravity in a life I hadn't realized was adrift. I met her in a used bookstore on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of place where dust motes dance in shafts of aged sunlight. She wasn't scanning the shelves, she was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, absorbed in a copy of Marcus Aurelius, oblivious to the world. Her beauty was not of the dramatic, urgent kind. It was the sustained, patient beauty of a river stone, smooth, deep-hued, and permanent. Her hair, the color of rich, dark mahogany, was usually pulled back in a simple braid, emphasizing the fine, thoughtful lines of her face. When she looked up and noticed me hovering awkwardly, her eyes, a startling, clear amber, held a kind of immediate recognition that settled something restless within me. "It's a deceptively demanding read, isn't it?" she said, her voice low and textured, like cello music. That was the beginning. Our relationship didn't ignite, it deepened, like a well. Elara was an architect of ideas, a philosophy professor, but more than that, she was the architect of my internal landscape. She possessed an unparalleled intellectual clarity. Our conversations weren't chatter, they were structured explorations, journeys through Kantian ethics, the poetry of Rilke, or the fractal nature of metropolitan growth. She challenged me to find the integrity in my own contradictions. With Elara, my passion was tender, almost reverent. It manifested in the quiet rituals we established, the slow, measured pace of Sunday mornings, where we would drink French press coffee on her small balcony overlooking the city's hushed park, each reading a separate book, yet entirely connected by the shared, comfortable silence. The intimacy was in the unspoken confirmation that we saw the world, fundamentally, in the same way, a grand, complex problem that deserved endless, gentle inquiry. One night, I remember standing in her living room, all exposed brick, worn Persian rugs, and books stacked in precarious towers, after a heated discussion about free will. I was still agitated, pacing, arguing a point I barely believed, just to hear a rebuttal. She walked toward me, not with a dramatic gesture, but with the quiet, inexorable pull of a tide. She placed her hands on my face, her touch cool and certain. "Elias," she whispered, her gaze holding mine captive, "you are trying to solve yourself as if you were a theorem. You are not. You are a truth, and I know your truth. Be still." The tenderness of that moment, the way she saw the chaos in me and offered stillness instead of judgment, was profound. Loving Elara was like living in a perfectly tempered climate. It was the security of knowing that when the external world inevitably dissolved into noise and uncertainty, there was a quiet, illuminated room waiting for me, where every piece of my soul was catalogued, understood, and treasured. She was my intellectual compass, the steady beat of my life's metronome, and the promise of a future built on unshakable mutual respect. I saw our lives stretching out, a long, elegant sentence written together. Julianna, the fire and the symphony. Then there was Julianna. She arrived in my life not as a quiet gravitational pull, but as an asteroid striking the atmosphere, all heat, light, and beautiful, necessary destruction. I met her 6 months after I began seeing Elara, a timing that still feels like a cosmic joke designed for maximum cruelty. Julianna was a freelance photographer, specializing in portraiture that captured the raw, untamed spirit of her subjects. She lived her life in an elevated key, a relentless, breathtaking staccato. She had wild, curly hair, the color of burnt caramel, and eyes that shifted from storm cloud gray to sea green, always sparkling with mischief or the shadow of a deep, unnameable sadness. Where Elara embodied stillness, Julianna was pure kinetic energy. She was chaos distilled into beauty. Our first date was not planned, it was an impromptu dash across 3 boroughs in a borrowed pickup truck to catch the sunset over a derelict shipyard, fueled by cheap wine and her fiercely beautiful laugh. The passion with Julianna was immediate, electric, and physically undeniable. It was the kind of connection that didn't just share a silence, it shattered it. She moved with an animal grace that fascinated me, her emotions playing across her face like a dramatic, unedited film. Loving her was less about shared philosophy and more about shared sensation, the smell of developing film, the taste of rain on a rooftop, the sound of her voice shouting above a street band. Our intimacy was forged in these sudden, shared, often reckless adventures. I remember a blizzard hitting the city. Instead of staying home, Julianna dragged me out. We ended up in a forgotten underground jazz club, warm and smoky, where the music was so dense it felt like a physical weight. We didn't exchange any deep thoughts that night, we just danced, a close, wordless language spoken only through our bodies. Later, wrapped in the single thin blanket in her cramped, bohemian studio apartment, she looked up at me, her cheeks flushed from the cold and the wine. "You're terrified of beautiful things, Elias," she murmured, tracing the line of my jaw with a cold finger. "You try to catalog them, to understand them, to make them safe. But you can't make me safe. You just have to hold on and watch the crash." Julianna was the mirror to the part of me that Elara's intellectualism disciplined, the part that craved risk, volatility, and unmediated experience. Her background was as free-form as her art. Raised by an itinerant artist mother, she had little regard for structure or planning. She lived entirely in the present, a glorious, terrifying commitment to the now. She was the living, breathing antidote to my tendency toward overanalysis. With her, I felt reckless and alive, as if every beat of my heart were a drum solo. She was the raw, unedited poetry of my life. The overlapping maps. The central, unbearable fact of my double life was not that I lied, though I did, miserably, constantly inventing parallel narratives, but that the love for each woman was whole. I never loved one of them less on the days I was with the other. My capacity simply doubled, and the two loves, rather than canceling each other out, resonated in a painful, overwhelming chord. I needed Elara's structure to prevent Julianna's chaos from consuming me, but I needed Julianna's fire to prevent Elara's world from becoming a beautifully organized tomb. I felt like a bridge anchored simultaneously to two distant, incompatible shores. The worst moments were the comparisons, the quiet, internal inventory I was constantly running. Elara and I were at a quiet gallery opening. She was discussing the political implications of a minimalist piece with the curator, her intelligence radiating like a soft light. I looked at her, so poised, so perfectly mine, and felt a fierce, possessive tenderness. Then I remembered Julianna, running through a fountain in her clothes the week before, laughing until she choked, pulling me into the cold water with her. The thought hit me, Elara would never do that. Julianna would never stop. Julianna and I were on a last-minute flight to Lisbon. She was sleeping with her head on my shoulder, a smudges of charcoal on her cheek from a sudden sketch she'd done in the airport. Her presence was a weight and a warmth I couldn't resist. Then I thought of Elara, home with a deadline, the steady, rhythmic tapping of her keyboard. I imagined her stopping, looking at the time, and missing me with a quiet, certain sorrow. The thought brought an icy clarity. Elara needs me to be reliable. Julianna needs me to be ready. The dialogue I ran in my head was ceaseless, brutal. Which love is more honest, Elias? The one built on shared vision, or the one built on shared breath? Elara understands your mind. Julianna understands your body and your hidden capacity for joy. One gives you peace. The other gives you purpose. The emotional zenith of the conflict came one rainy Tuesday. It was Elara's birthday. I had planned a quiet, perfect evening, a homemade meal, a rare first edition of a book she'd been seeking, and a deeply felt letter. I was in the cab on the way to her apartment when Julianna called. She wasn't supposed to be in the city. She'd taken an assignment photographing a protest 50 miles away. "Elias, I'm standing outside your office building." Her voice was strained, breathless. "I came back early. The light is incredible, the way the rain is hitting the pavement, the neon signs reflecting, it's the perfect backdrop for the piece I'm working on. I need you to stand in the frame, just for 5 minutes. I need your face in this light." My stomach dropped. "Julianna, I can't. I have a prior engagement." "Of course you do. You always have an engagement." "Just 5 minutes, Elias. Stand with me in the electric storm. Say yes to the chaos, just once." She didn't know it was Elara's birthday, but her words were a perfect, agonizing summation of the choice I faced, Elara's structured happiness, or Julianna's beautiful, demanding chaos? I told Julianna I was tied up and hung up the phone. The refusal felt like a physical amputation. I felt the profound, electric loss of the spontaneous adventure, the image of her standing alone in the luminous rain, a missed masterpiece. I arrived at Elara's. The evening was perfect. We talked about the nature of compromise, ironically. Later, as we lay entwined, a fragile, tender quiet descended. "You seem preoccupied, love," Elara murmured, tracing the faint worry lines on my forehead. "Tell me what theorem you're trying to solve now." I looked at her, the woman whose existence was the most potent, stabilizing force in my life, and the lie felt too heavy to carry. I did not confess Julianna's existence. Instead, I spoke a truth that was a half-lie. "I'm just trying to figure out how two irreconcilable needs can exist in one person," I whispered. Elara smiled, a gentle, knowing curve of her lips. "Ah. That's not a theorem, Elias. That's just being human. You can want stability and adventure. The trick is to find the adventure in the stability." The irony was a razor. Elara, in her pure philosophical grace, had given me the perfect, impossible answer to my secret, divided heart. But the adventure she offered was intellectual, the adventure I was chasing was visceral, and it existed 50 blocks away, probably still standing in the rain. The clarity of loss. The end came not through a dramatic confrontation, but through an erosion, a slow decay brought on by the impossibility of sustaining two parallel universes. The constant emotional shift, the deep breath I had to take before entering Elara's quiet sanctuary, the shedding of my skin I had to perform before meeting Julianna's restless intensity, finally exhausted me. I was becoming a hollow man, a phantom tethered to two realities. The realization arrived during a solo trip I took, an attempt to find the singular self that existed without either of them. I was hiking a steep, desolate trail, the air thin and sharp. I paused at the summit, looking down at a valley shrouded in mist. I wasn't thinking of Elara's wisdom or Julianna's fire. I was thinking of the man I had become, a liar by necessity, a fraction of a partner by design. And I realized the core truth: the highest expression of love is not possession or passion, but integrity. I could not offer integrity to two people at once, because the needs of Elara and Julianna were fundamentally, beautifully, mutually exclusive. Elara required a partner who chose shared quietude as their primary terrain. Julianna required a partner who chose the ecstatic, rootless moment as their only home. To choose one meant amputating the part of me that thrived in the other's light. But to choose neither was to condemn myself, and them, to permanent half-measures. My emotional conclusion was not a clean decision, but an act of acceptance of necessary loss. I chose the path that allowed me to be the most whole version of Elias, not the most exciting, or the most tranquil, but the most integrated. I broke it off with Julianna first. We sat in her studio, surrounded by the beautiful debris of her life, canvases, lenses, notebooks. She didn't cry. She listened, her storm cloud eyes fixed on me with a painful, terrifying understanding. "You're choosing the ground, Elias. You're choosing the future tense," she said, her voice flat. "It's safer. I always knew you were afraid of the crash." "I'm not afraid of the crash, Julianna. I'm afraid of being the cause of two crashes," I said, and the words were the most honest thing I had ever spoken to her. "My love for you is a gift of pure, unmanageable joy. But I can't build a life on pure combustion. I need roots, and you need wings." She nodded, a single, sharp motion. "Then let me go. Don't look back, Elias. I don't belong in your architecture." The pain of that goodbye was the pain of severing a brilliant, burning wire. It left a phantom ache, a constant longing for the dizzying height she provided. With Elara, the confession was harder, longer. I told her everything: the how, the why, the terrifying pull Julianna held. I watched the realization dawn in her amber eyes, not as shock, but as a slow, inevitable philosophical conclusion to the problem of me. Elara's response was measured, devastatingly calm. She didn't shout, she simply catalogued the truth. "You loved the stability I offered, but you needed to prove you weren't reliant on it. You went searching for the antithesis of the promise we made." "Did she offer you deeper conversation?" "No. Never," I choked out. "She offered me deeper feeling. Just different, Elara. Not better." Different is the point, Elias, she said, her voice finally breaking, the sound of glass fracturing. I cannot be your anchor if you constantly long for the storm. You have forced me to share a space I believed was sacred and singular. And the tragedy is, I understand your conflict entirely. That's what hurts. That I can understand your need for her, but I can no longer trust your need for me. She did not ask me to choose her. She simply let me go, the quiet finality of her decision a heavier verdict than any rage could have been. The love she had given me, the space for honest self-inquiry, ultimately led to the realization that I had betrayed the very foundation of that love. I ended up alone, the quiet that followed both women leaving more profound than any solitude I had ever known. The 2 rooms in my cathedral were empty, the echoes of their distinct presences the only things left behind. I had not chosen Elara's structure over Julianna's chaos, I had chosen integrity, and integrity demanded I stand apart until the pieces of my divided heart fused into a singular, if scarred, whole. I learned that mature love isn't about finding the person who perfectly fills all your voids, it's about choosing the singular path that allows you to be the best, most authentic partner you can be, even if it means mourning the beautiful things that lay on the unchosen road. The pain remains, a quiet, textured ache, but it is no longer the pain of conflict. It is the respectful grief for 2 profound, true loves I was simply not large enough to hold at the same time. I walk now with a limping heart, but at least I walk in a straight line.